Trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here. So let me ask you, Michael, you know, he just testified that he saw Dean fiddling with the camera system. And his answer was, I think so, yes. All right, to me, right there, that creates a problem for the state.
It does. And Judge Jesse, I wasn't sure if I was watching an actual trial or like an episode of Breaking Bad, like the documentary, if people were, if they extended to a 7th season. This whole thing is so bizarre. As my co-panelist just broke down the testimony, and as you pointed out, I think that this is looking more and more to me like a very bad prosecution. I feel like there's too many, as Jack said, nuggets that have been laid for the defense. It's ironic that I'm on here with Jack Rice, examining this, because the last time I was on with Jack Rice, we were examining testimony that he found to be subpar, and I've used his video to educate some of the attorneys in my office. I fully agree with the way he analyzes the cross-examination, and I don't think this is looking good for the prosecution.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this jury does, because I think there's some facts that point to the defendant, but I also think there are those, obviously, that point to the person he says did it, which is Dean. All right, let's go back in. I understand court's now back from the quick break. We're going to see the remainder of Josh Caldwell's testimony.
Just briefly, I want to return to you going to the Holy Rosary Bank with Tim.
Okay.
When you were in the parking lot, you attempted to, or you did text Christine's phone.
Correct.
And there was a response. I can show you what the response was.
I remember the response.
Remember the response? I have her phone, LOL.
Correct.
Right. And that response was at 4:55 p.m.?
I don't know the time.
Okay.
Okay.
Direct you to the top 3 messages. Okay, so 4:55 p.m. when you received the response, I have her phone, LOL.
Correct.
And then we mentioned this text earlier, where you text Dean, 5:02 p.m., all set, brother?
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor, but I would like to move to admit Defense Exhibit AA as a full exhibit and strike ID.
Do you recall?
Surveillance video?
That's the...
Yeah, no objection.
all right, so AA, full exhibit, ID is stricken. Anything further?
Nothing further.
Redirect?
No, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Caldwell, that completes your testimony. You may step down. Thank you.
I can't help but wonder if the jury's like, shoo, the witness is done. He was up there a long time. But coming up next is the next witness to take the stand. It's an officer. He reviewed surveillance footage of the defendant around town. Of course, another state's witness. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Michael Jaafar. Michael, tell me what you think as we're watching, again, the surveillance video that we know is of the defendant, Timothy Verrill.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit confused, Judge Ashley. I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that the state pressed charges against this person. Now they're coming up against them in a retrial. They must feel confident that he was a person who committed these murders. But I'm just getting a little bit lost. And maybe this was the best defendant they could find. Maybe the evidence against everybody else was scant. Maybe this was the least scant evidence of any defendant. And obviously they're a state. They have to do something about it. They can't let these 2 murders go by the wayside. But I feel like they're losing this case. I'm just a little bit confused. This is surveillance of him at a place where he didn't commit the murders, right? So, I mean, it's somewhat helpful, but it's not. I'm just getting a little bit lost, and I feel like the tide is turning against them in this case.
And that's my concern, is the jury getting lost? Because
well, what the defense was able to bring out was you know, he always smelled the body odor.
Exactly,
He just
that was
wasn't a
brilliant.
very sort of clean guy, or he had those issues or whatever. And when, you know, the pants, he wanted to change his pants. Yeah, that sounds terrible when you first say it, but they asked him, they said, was anything wrong with the pants he had on? And he said, no, I didn't notice anything wrong with the pants he had on. So again, we're talking about these little bits of information that cut against the state's theory.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what we're looking at here is a very basic analysis by the prosecution. So I remember when we were being trained for being public defenders 16, 17 years ago, I remember a course being set up by an investigator, and he grabbed a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and drew every inflection point in the path of the suspect. And he led him back to the scene of the crime in order to show, hey, at every stage of the way, you have to show where this person was and why they tied to the crime and why they tied to the scene of the crime. And obviously, that's what the prosecution is doing here. They're tying him back, and they're saying, hey, this happened earlier. We're charging him with falsifying evidence. He went to Lowe's. He bought a bunch of things that could potentially help them do it. And so they're tying him back physically to the scene of the crime. And to your point, Michael, yeah, I mean, that testimony by Josh about the BO, and I mean, that, in my opinion, is all helpful to the defense. But if the payload that the prosecution is going to give us at the end is, we have pretty much every piece of evidence you could have to show him directly in the scene of the crime. We've already established that he had the motive to do it. He knew that these girls were going to testify against him. He had the mental capacity of a person who would do this. He said he was having dark thoughts. He was on medication. We've done everything we possibly can to show you that there's no other person that physically could have done this. I could see this going in a good direction for the prosecution, because at the end of the day, you only have to try the facts that you're given. So the prosecution are not I'm sure they wish they had better forensic evidence and fingernail evidence. They don't have that. So I'm sure that what they're doing here is the best they possibly can, and they must have had a reason to press these charges. So this is kind of like showing me why they were so convinced that this is the proper person to press these charges against.
And you know what, I just wonder, Michael, if there's going to be a question for the jury that says, can we see that video blown up so we could see what's in the cart? Like, the jury's going to really look closely, I think, at the details in these. All right, we need to take a break. I think it's confusing enough, the set of facts that's being presented, that has to be presented in this case, that, again, especially seeing him on video, Michael, I don't see him testifying. But I'll come back to that, because Michael Jaafar, I want to ask you a question. Let's just assume, okay, he's buying shoes, if he's buying any clothes. To me, the next natural thought I have is, well, it must be that they're showing he replaced his clothes because they are bloody from committing the murder. But there's no evidence that we know of that any bloody clothes were found.
You have to take the shortest path from A to B. If you have the option of showing them 10 hours, but only one of those hours is productive, only show them that 1 hour. So, Judge Ashley, maybe that's what they're trying to do, but at the end of the day, I have to assume that these prosecutors and these investigators, after a lengthy investigation, in their best wisdom and judgment, they decided that this is the person who committed the crime, and they were looking at this evidence when they made that decision. So this must be important to them, and until I see a payoff, to me, it's still a little bit confusing. It might be a good payoff, but for now, it's a little bit confusing, but maybe that's what they're trying to prove.
Yeah, and Judge, you know, it's like we talked about sometimes in these trials, the same witness who introduces the video will tell you what's happening on the video, but sometimes not, because they're not the person that's responsible for that aspect of the case. Somebody else will be called to the stand to tell you what they bought or what the receipts say, things of that nature. So let's hope that that's coming up, because I agree with Jack. I want to know what he's doing in those stores. It's nice to see him in it, but what is he buying? What is he doing? I think that would be helpful.
Michael Jaafar. Michael, tell me about the fact that we know the daughter is in jail for helping the mother. I think that's going to be one of the state's key witnesses, because she's already convicted, already in jail.
It's pretty much as good as a confession at that point. Your daughter's going to testify against you, and they have the evidence. I think she's pretty much cooked at this point, and she's only facing a second-degree murder charge. She can serve life in prison anyway, but yeah, I mean, your daughter being capable to testify against you doesn't get worse than that for a defendant.
Yeah.
And I wonder if she will testify.